Hello, and welcome to Kraft Conspiracies. I am your host, Michael Kraft, and we're going to talk about a very strange case, the Betty Andreasson abduction. Now, the idea of alien abduction seems crazy to most people, mostly because it's so unbelievable and doesn't happen to most people, at least not that they remember. But I'll tell you, there are many who claim to have been taken in the night by strange beings that do not appear to originate from Earth. Floated out of their beds and levitated through a closed window or even a solid wall, people remember these strange encounters in the night. Sometimes the beings themselves walk through a wall or a solid door, as in what happened in the abduction of Betty Andreasson Luca. It happened in the state of Massachusetts, in the town of Ashburnham. The year was 1967. This very strange incident is still talked about in the UFO community. Betty's family, her 7 children, her father and mother, were in the living room, and Betty herself was in the kitchen when the strange event took place. It was around 6:30 p.m. The lights in the house flickered, and a red light shone through the kitchen window and into the living room. This alarmed the kids, and Betty ran to them to comfort them and calm them down. Betty's father, who was also startled by the red light, ran to the kitchen window to see where it was coming from. He saw something outside that he could not believe to his dying day. He saw 5 strange creatures moving towards the house in a kind of hopping fashion, like kids in a potato sack race, but not hopping as hard up and down as that. Stunned, he watched as the creatures walked through the solid wooden door of the kitchen as they entered the house. It was like the door was not even there. They passed right through it, like you or I would through thick fog. I know that would sure have startled me. Immediately after the beings entered the house, Betty's family was placed into a kind of trance by the beings. One of the aliens stood by Betty's father, while another had communication with Betty on a telepathic level. She could hear the creature's voice in her mind. One of the beings was around 5 feet tall, which she took as being the leader, while the others were shorter, perhaps around 4 feet. They all had very wide eyes, small ears and noses with pear-shaped heads. Their mouths were only slits. The 5 aliens wore a type of blue coverall with a wide belt around their waist. On the sleeves of the coveralls was the logo of a bird that resembled an eagle with small wings and was gold in color. There were 3 fingers on each hand, and they were wearing boots, somewhat similar to ours. A strange thing Betty noticed is that they didn't seem to walk like we do, but they floated a few inches above the floor as they moved. Betty, oddly enough, was not frightened or upset by all she was seeing, but felt calm and serene, perhaps an effect of the aliens upon her mind. However, Betty was understandably worried about her family, particularly her children. The aliens seemed to sense that Betty was concerned over their welfare. They released her 11-year-old daughter to show her that they were indeed all okay and coming to no harm. Soon after Betty's daughter was placed back into a trance, Betty was taken by the beings to their craft, which had landed on a small hill near her home. The craft looked about 20 feet in diameter and had the usual saucer-shaped exterior. Betty recalled after the abduction that the craft took off and joined a mothership that was in orbit around Earth. She was taken to a room where she saw strange equipment and was subjected to a physical examination and a series of tests. One of these tests caused Betty harm, but resulted in a kind of spiritual awakening she had never experienced before in her life, or would after. Betty never did remember all the details of her abduction, but was told that she would remember all when the time was right. After the tests, she was taken back to her home and the beings departed. Her family came out of the trance they were placed in with no ill effects. Betty had answered an ad placed by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who at the time was seeing individuals who believed to have alien experiences. Dr. Hynek unfortunately rejected Betty's letter to him on the basis that he thought it was just too difficult to believe. It was 2 years later that her story was finally investigated by a group that included an electronics engineer, a telecommunications engineer, aerospace engineer, a solar physicist, and a UFO investigator. They concluded that Betty and her family were sane, and that they believed that they had experienced something extraordinary. This strange case is still being discussed to this day by investigators of the UFO phenomena.